Hi everyone, Miss Martin here, and today we are going to do our mold terrarium experiment. Now this experiment takes 10 days, and you'll see why. Let's first watch the intro video.
In today's activity, you're going to make a mold terrarium, a sealed off container where you can purposely let mold grow on food for several days. Your goal is to run an experiment and find out what conditions help mold to grow and what conditions stop mold from growing. You probably know that if you leave food out at room temperature, mold will start growing just fine. So you'll want at least one mold terrarium just like this. We'll call it the basic mold terrarium. But you'll also want to make a few more mold terrariums so that you can experiment to figure out what conditions make mold grow better and what conditions stop mold from growing. To figure that out, you'll want to try some different growing conditions for your mold plates. So you'll work as a small team to make a mold terrarium that's different from the basic terrarium in just one way. Your team will decide what one condition you want to change about your terrarium and then see what happens. For example, you might be curious about what happens if the mold terrarium were to be kept somewhere really warm, so you put it by a heater. This mold terrarium would be just like the basic terrarium, except for one condition that you're changing, the temperature. You'd be keeping every other condition the same. You'd just be making the temperature warmer. And that way, you can find out how warmth affects how mold grows. Or, you might have heard that in olden days, before there were refrigerators, people used to put a lot of salt on their food. So you might decide to see what happens if you add salt to the food in your mold terrarium. If you have a few teams, you can test out a few different ideas, and so learn what happens under all kinds of different conditions. But even if you only grow a basic mold terrarium, you'll at least get a great look at how mold looks like and how it grows over time. Okay, it's time to get some mold growing. I'll show you how to set it up step by step.
All right, so here's what we're going to do. As you can see, I have set up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 basic mold terrariums. And thanks from your input on the survey, I've come up with these 6 different tests. First, hot and wet. We're going to take one, we will dip it in water, we'll make everything moist, and then we're going to leave it outside. Next one, hot and dry. So we'll do the same thing, except we will not put any water on it. We'll leave it outside. Next one, cold and wet. So we'll moisten one, and then I'll put one in the fridge. And the same one, cold and dry. This will be like our basic one, cold and dry. Leave it without being moistened, leave it in the fridge. Then I wanted to try out 2 different ones. First, I like the salt idea. So we're gonna try hot and wet, and then cover it in some regular salt. Okay? And last but not least, this one's kind of fun. Hot and wet plus saliva. Saliva is another word for your spit. So I'm going to lick each of the different food products, make sure they're moist, and then leave them outside as well. Okay? So let's get started. I'm going to set up the camera so you can see me setting these up. And each day I will post a update. So first one, hot and wet. So I'm going to take this plate, moisten everything. I don't want to get it soaked. Just want to get it wet enough, like the bread seats, just a little bit wet. Banana, some blueberries, and I want to make sure they're all closely stacked together. So we're going to place those like that. Okay, those are all wet. Take the bag. Carefully slide it inside the bag. And you seal the bag. And then add the label hot and wet. And then the last step is take some duct tape to that bag. Reason being is we do not want to open these once they start growing mold. If you've ever smelled food that's gone bad in your kitchen, you know it gets very, very stinky. So we're just going to take the duct tape, add that extra layer of protection to our noses so that they don't get funky. Right, so this one will go outside. Next one is hot and dry. I'm just going to leave it as is. Take the bag. And tomorrow when you see our first update, I'll show you exactly where I put all of our mold terrariums. And This one is hot and dry. Put a little on it as well. Trust me, last year someone opened one of these in our classroom and it stunk up the place. So here's our hot and dry. And we're gonna let these go for at least 10 days to see what happens. Next one, cold and wet. So this one, dip it in the water. Make sure they're positioned next to each other. And this is gonna go right back in the fridge, labeled, so it doesn't get mistaken for real food. If your parents allow you to, you can try to set these up at home. Just remember, you have to ask permission first. Okay, this is cold and wet. This one will stay in the refrigerator. Duct tape. I'll put the cold and wet ones over here since they're going right in the fridge when we're done here. Cold and dry. This is our basic model. We're just going to put it back in the fridge, and this will be a good test to see how long regular food, regular fruit and stuff like lasts when it's not really touched. Get over there, Blueberry. There we go. And duct tape. Cold and dry. Now we get to the two fun ones, salt and saliva. So there's my two cold ones, there's my two hot ones. Next, we're gonna wet these and then pour salt on them. Back in ancient times, they used to use salt as a preservative, which means they used salt and they would take their meat, they would dry it out and use the salt to keep the food from spoiling. So a theory is that salt is some sort of preservative. So I'll take my regular salt, just gonna pour it over top. Make sure they're all nicely doused with salt. Let's see if that keeps the mold from going. And last but not least, the duct tape for this one. Now we'll do the saliva test. This is hot, wet, and salt, so this one will go outside as well. Here's hoping no animals mess with our mold terrariums. I'll have to keep them up high on the grill. Last but not least, first I'll moisten them. And then I will lick each fruit. And let's see how dirty the human mouth is. At the end of this video, you guys are going to take your very best guess of what you think is going to happen. All right, and then last but not least, this is all fresh cut fruit. Not about today. None of it should be spoiled yet. And the bread. Ew, yucky. Wet bread is not fun. Okay, our final mold terrarium is ready to go. Put it in the sealed plastic bag. With our label. And okay, and I'm going to show you all of our finished products. You can lay them out for us. So we have, sorry about that, that's the one I just licked. Hot, wet, plus the salt. You can see there's salt on those blueberries there. hot and dry, hot and wet, so that everything's moistened in there, cold and dry, and cold and wet. When we're done this video, you're going to take your very best guess of which one do you think will grow the most mold, and which one do you think will grow the least mold. Each day, I will post a quick Edpuzzle video that shows an update of each of their molds.